There were things that I was successful at, but long-term relationships were not one of them. And I felt that it was really not my destiny to have a long-term relationship. They called me a traitor. But no one ever asked who he really was. At 75, Victoria Principal. The former beauty icon of Dallas sat before the camera for the first time in nearly 20 years of silence. Gone was the calm, composed gaze people remembered. She looked straight into the lens and said the one thing Hollywood never wanted to hear. "I was married to a man who never loved women." That single sentence was the spark that ignited a storm of truth. For 2 decades, the tabloids only talked about her alleged affair the night the police showed up in Beverly Hills and the divorce that cost her over $50 million. But no one had ever asked what really happened behind those villa doors. Victoria had lived half her life in silence to protect the reputation of the man who once called her his wife. But now she chose freedom, not through tears, but through truth. If you think you know this story, think again. Step inside a journey that tears down the facade, from lies written on surgical invoices to silences bought with millions of dollars. Because sometimes, to live truthfully, you must destroy the role the world adored. 1. They said I betrayed him, but no one asked who he really was. At 75, Victoria Principal no longer cared for fame or gossip. She once said softly but clearly, "I stayed silent for too long, not out of fear, but because some truths were too heavy to bring into the light." Then she spoke of her marriage that lasted more than 20 years, what she called the hardest role I ever played because it had no script. When Victoria married Dr. Harry Glassman in 1985, Hollywood nodded in approval. They're beautiful, intelligent, successful, a Beverly Hills fairy tale. Harry was a cosmetic surgeon to A-list stars, politicians, and top executives. Victoria, who had just left Dallas, was a symbol of strength, grace, and mystery. Together they appeared at grand galas and elite dinners, the picture of stability amid Hollywood's chaos. But the truth was, they stopped sharing a bed only a few years after their wedding. Victoria said that by their second year, she sensed something was wrong. Harry never touched her, not the way a husband touches a wife. At first, she thought he was tired or overworked, but that feeling never left. It only grew colder. One night in late 2001, Victoria received an anonymous call. A man's voice said briefly, "If you want to know who your husband really is, go to the underground parking lot of the Chateau Marmont, 11 p.m. tonight." She waited in her car for 40 minutes, her hands trembling. At 10:57, a silver BMW stopped. Harry stepped out, not alone. Beside him was a young man familiar somehow. When they moved closer, Victoria realized it was Brandon Kay, a fitness model who had appeared in fragrance campaigns for a company whose CEO Harry worked with. She could never forget that image, Harry and Brandon walking into the hotel elevator, Brandon smiling, his hand brushing her husband's waist. "I didn't want to believe what I saw. I thought, maybe they were just friends. Maybe I misunderstood. I wanted to believe in the good." The next day, Victoria asked quietly, her voice trembling. Harry frowned and sighed, annoyed. "He's a patient. I was consulting him after hours. You should trust me." She wanted to believe him, but something inside her broke. Weeks later, Victoria met Brandon at his gym. The conversation was brief. He didn't confirm anything, but his calm, knowing look told her everything. That night, she left Harry a note. "You don't have to love me, but don't use me as a shadow to hide who you are." She expected silence. Instead, Harry struck back. A week later, a tabloid ran a headline, "Victoria Principal caught getting too close with male co-star." Attached was a blurry photo of her and a young actor sitting in a car after a script reading. The story spread fast. Paparazzi swarmed her house, shouting, "Did you cheat on your husband? Are you having an affair?" Victoria stood still. She understood he built a show to punish me for touching his secret. Years later, she said only one line. "All my life I was taught women must stay loyal. But no one taught me what to do when the man you marry isn't loyal to himself." That was the day she realized she wasn't a wife, she was an unwilling accomplice in a performance built to protect someone else's image. And the price was her own dignity. Victoria stayed silent for years. She didn't sue, didn't correct the tabloids, didn't speak a word until she turned 75 when every other role had ended. All she had left was the truth. "I don't speak to hurt anyone. I speak so I can finally live." Some truths don't arrive all at once. They seep in slowly, detail by detail, like drops of water falling on the same crack until it finally breaks open. After discovering the truth about Harry Glassman's orientation, Victoria didn't leave right away. Partly because silence had become her habit, and partly because she still hoped to preserve something, if not love, then at least respect. But the longer she stayed, the clearer it became this marriage wasn't just an emotional trap, it was a single link in a world she was never truly a part of. 2. I didn't marry a man. I married an empire of deceit. Harry wasn't just a surgeon. He was a gatekeeper to a shadow network of favors-coded smiles and services wrapped in absolute discretion. His clients weren't simply people wanting facelifts or nose jobs. They were politicians, CEOs, and aging stars seeking to erase time and mistakes alike. At first, Victoria thought he was simply talented and trusted. But then came the dinners with no invitations, the whispered phrases that sounded like codes. "I need a document adjustment. Can you protect the image if something leaks?" When she asked, Harry replied casually, "That's just how Hollywood works. Don't ask." Gradually, she saw that the adjustments weren't just on faces. They were on headlines, records, and truths. Some stars were manufactured, others cleaned of scandals overnight. And she realized she herself had become an accessory. At events, she wasn't Victoria Principal, the strong woman America admired, but simply Mrs. Glassman, the elegant proof of his respectability. They stopped calling me by my name. I became a fashionable accessory. At one secret dinner in Holmby Hills where phones were confiscated and cameras banned, Victoria overheard Harry and a media mogul laughing. "If she threatens to leak photos, I can seal her mouth with 2 injections and an NDA. Send her to me, I've got people in the newsroom. We can make her look unstable in 3 days." They laughed. Victoria froze. That was the moment I realized I wasn't beside my husband anymore. I was surrounded by illusions where morals weren't invited. She withdrew, avoided parties, stopped appearing with him. Magazines mocked her as aged retired, a former star turned housewife. No one knew she was trying to escape a world built on silence and manipulation. Once she saw a file on Harry's desk, a media plan to restore the image of an actor accused of misconduct. The document detailed a 6-month Operation Cosmetic Rejuvenation, a fake relationship with a famous actress, a media victim campaign, and a charity drive funded by another client. Victoria sighed. I lived in a world where beauty could be bought, and truth was always for sale. It wasn't just a line, it was the bitter conclusion of a woman who once believed she had entered a marriage only to realize she had stepped into a gilded web of lies. When she left, she didn't just leave a man, she walked out of an entire system. The price was nearly 20 years of silence while the world believed she was the unfaithful one who gave up a perfect life. But truth, as she said, doesn't need belief to exist. They can buy headlines, build images, even rent a fake life. But the one thing they can't do is live it for me. 3. That night, the police came because something broke.